My name is Carlos, and I'm an amateur photographer living in the town of Cold River, which is in the northern forest. I made my living taking pictures of the forest, scenery, bears, lakes, rivers, and even the glaciers in the northern forest. Then I would sell the pictures to Rangers Tourist Board, to artists in the Seven Cities, to my website, or occasionally people willing to pay for pictures put on their screensaver. But recently my camera broke. So since it was broken, I had to get it replaced. Now, the town of Cold River is extremely small. The general store also doubles as a grocery store, a post office, and a movie theater. The bar doubles as a restaurant and a coffee shop. The ranger station is here also, and it doubles as the only law enforcement in town. And there's even a motel here that receives almost no business. It doesn't really double as anything, but they buy a lot of my photos. So, with my camera broken, I went to the general store, asking if they had any digital cameras. The store owner remarked that he can get it replaced in a couple of months, since he had to order it from the Seven Cities and ship it up to the northern forest. The owner, however, offered to loan me his ex-wife's digital camera. She passed away in her sleep last year. I didn't know her very well, but she seemed nice. Her camera is a few years out of date, but it still takes sharp photos and it can still upload photos online, so I take it, promising to return it to the owner when my new camera came in. That day, after I got my temporary camera, I took some pictures from the top of the mountain, getting some great views from down there. The views are quite incredible, but this camera doesn't have the resolution I'm used to. Still, though, the photos should be sellable. At least I hope it would have been. So, when I made it back home, which is a 2-room cabin that also doubles as a bathroom, one room is my living room kitchen and my living space. I've converted my bedroom to an office. Here, I'm able to upload my photos online to my shop. While I definitely enjoy the quiet life up here in the northern forest, it is definitely a relief that Vanth internet service still works up here. So I can catch up on my shows and make money by selling pictures online. After uploading my photos on the camera and clearing out the storage on the camera, I watched some news from Isles City before falling asleep. That night, I dreamt of rolling hills unlike anything that exists in the northern forest. They went on for miles. The grass was golden, and on the hill where I stood, I was able to see all the other hills, looking like islands bobbing in an ocean. On these hills in front of me, I could see a line of tombstones that stood on their very top, looking almost like a fence. Single file, going up and down each hill. In my dream, I took a photo of the hills and their near tombstones. In my dreams, I'm still often a photographer. Such a workaholic that I even dream of work, right? So I continue through the dream, making it down the hill, and I make it to the ocean. It's truly endless. I can see miles and miles, and I cannot comprehend its size or end. So, I do what any normal person would do, and I take pictures of the waves. Watching as they grow bigger and bigger, soon the waves towered over the hills and towered over me. So tall that they parted the clouds above me, so I took a photo just before the wave crashed over me. When it fell over me, I felt a jolt rushing over my body. In the water, I struggled to breathe. It's like trying to breathe through fabric. But once I relax, I forget that I need to breathe and just let myself drift deeper and deeper into the water. Despite the depth, there was plenty to see. Jellyfish glowing, turtles swimming by, and little silverfish darting out everywhere. Looking up, I can see the way the light dashes through the water, dancing in ways impossible for me to ever see in my life. I take another photo, but the flash makes the fish swim away. At first, I don't think much of it, until I felt something below me, looking up at me. Turning around, despite the clear water, I could see something deeper into the ocean. It was cloaked in shadow and hard to focus on, but I could tell for sure that there was something deep in the ocean. Raising my camera to my face, I focused on it the best I could, but it was still out of focus. I couldn't tell for sure what was kept in the deep. Still, I snapped the photo, the flash exposing it just for a moment. Only as soon as the flash hit it, it pounced towards me. Is it pouncing underwater? It pounced or swam towards me. I still couldn't see it, but I was aware of it surrounding me, depriving me of light and wrapping its tentacles around my neck, pulling me deeper and deeper into the ocean. As I struggled and fought against it, it got harder and harder to breathe. My limbs were unable to so much as twitch until suddenly I jerked myself awake, sitting straight up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat and panting. After a few moments, I calmed myself. It was just a night terror. A bad one, but now that I knew it wasn't real, I could calm myself again. After taking a few more deep breaths, I laid down again, focusing on my breaths until I was calm enough to sleep once more. The next day, I went out on the trail again, trying to get pictures of the trees as they started to change color from green to orange, while at the same time the first snowfall of the year fell through the trees. There's only a few days in a year where you can catch a picture of the leaves still in the trees in the autumn colors, while snow is falling around it. A few days too early and there's no snow around the trees. A few days too late and the snow would be gray and the branches would be all bare. So I spent all the day on the trail lining up the perfect shots and getting pictures of the trees with the snow coming down. It was difficult in some places. A lot of people in the 7 cities think the northern forest is an untouched wilderness where anything can go and anything can happen. In some places, it is still like this. But a lot of the northern forest also has trash, campgrounds, or even day hikers. Humanity's touch all over this place. All of which just wrecks my photos whenever I have to include them. I don't even like having my shadow or my footprints in the photo. But even though I was out for over 10 hours, I was only able to take about a dozen photos. There were just too many people out on the trail. Sometimes they were friendly, but more often than not they just ignored me. But in the eyes of my camera, they were basically the same thing. When I finally made it home to upload my newest photos to my website, I saw that yesterday's photos already had hundreds of comments already. I was honestly impressed. Most of the time, my photos had 1 or maybe 2 comments. A lot of them had no comments at all. But still, a lot of comments meant a lot of attention, and maybe more potential buyers. Checking the comments, a lot of them were very strange. Where did you find this? Is this real? I thought you took photos of the northern forest. Now, 1 or 2 comments like this might be summed up as a troll, but with so many comments from so many different people, was there something wrong with my photos? So, I checked on the photos that were getting so many comments, pulling it up on my computer. The first photo that had nearly 300 comments was a picture taken from the top of the hill of all the other hills. You know, the ones that were topped with a line of gravestones like a fence? What I had photographed in my dreams. Checking on the other photos, I saw that everything else I took a picture of in my dream was uploaded to my website. It was titled, it had a price, it had a watermark and everything. Apparently my picture of the gravestones in the hill was called Eternal Watchman, and the pictures of the wave cresting over me was Ocean's Embrace. Both were listed as being over 100 centi, when I normally charge 10 or 20 centi for my pictures. I prepared to delete the dream photos, figuring whatever was happening here, it wasn't fair to the art of photography to take pictures of my dreams. But before I was able to delete the photos, I noticed that my website gave me a new notification. Turns out the only thing higher than the amount of comments on these photos was the amount of people buying them. Eternal Watchmen sold nearly 3,000 times, and Ocean's Embrace sold 5,000 times. Over 800,000 centi, I whispered to myself. A good month. I sold enough to cover my expenses with a little extra to squirrel away to barely cover my bad months. Now these 2 photos alone made me more money in one night than I could have made in 20 years worth of good months. Even my other photos, mundane shots of the landscape and close-ups of leaves, were doing better than normal. The halo effect. People liked my impossible photos, so it helped draw positive attention to my other photos. My mouse hovered over the delete button before I slid it over to cancel. This would help pay the bills, and it would mean that I wouldn't struggle anymore. So I could spend more time taking photos just for my art. Also, it wasn't like I wasn't taking the photos myself. I was just taking it while I was asleep. Now, successfully rationalizing my new success, I went through my photo prices. I spent some time debating raising the prices on some of my cheaper things with how much I was selling. So I sorted it lowest to highest, and I somehow noticed I was selling one photo for a single centus. But somehow this photo had no sales at all and no comments, despite the dirt cheap price. Pulling it up, I checked the photo and my breath caught in my throat. It was the photo I took of what was in the ocean. The website had it labeled as, "What Cries Beneath Us All." I could see it clearer in the photo than I could in my dream. It was almost octopus-like, but on each of its tentacles, instead of suckers, there were eyes. Millions upon millions of eyes, only getting denser and denser the closer you get to the octopus body, which the body was made entirely out of eyes, segmented like flies. Except every single eye had the rectangular pupil and the orange sclera of a cephalopod. All of these eyes were focused on me. Once I caught my breath again and felt the tightness of my chest lessen, I promptly deleted this photo. It was way too freaky to me. Plus, it wasn't selling and no one was commenting on it. Almost like they were too scared to even look at it. Still, the photo was deleted and I figured I was safe. That night, I uploaded my photos that I took on the trail, and when a commenter asked for more of my surrealist photos, I just responded, "Wait and see." I'm not sure how I managed to take the photos in my dream, but deciding to do the same thing I did last night, I left the camera plugged in with no photos on it, and this seemed to be the key. That night, my dream started with me on the trail. I watched as it stretched out in front of me endlessly, lined by endless trees. Every tree was perfect, full of orange leaves, icicles dripping off each branch, forming perfect sculptures, the snow falling in slow motion, freezing in place just long enough to take a picture, not a single footstep and not a single whole leaf on the ground. After taking some photos, I turned back to face where I was walking from. I could see a single trail of footprints leading away from the trees. It seemed to go on for hundreds of miles. I never would be able to see such distance in the real world, so I took this photo too. But something happened. After I took the photo, I realized that there was something on the horizon moving towards me. Trying to focus on it, I couldn't see what it was clearly. So I took another photo, and in the camera screen, I could clearly see that it was a someone, not a something. It was still gray and out of focus, but I could see that it had 2 arms, 2 legs, and it was walking upright. So clearly, this must be someone rather than something. I glanced up from the camera screen, and the figure on the horizon was gone. Turning away from the horizon, I now focused on the sky. I just noticed how much it looked like the night sky just at twilight. But there was no sun, no stars, nor anything else to spoil this perfect sunset. Taking a picture of the sky, I was in awe of it, just admiring it for a moment. When done, I continued my walk into the woods when I became aware something was following me. Turning around, I faced what was following me. Maybe a couple 100 feet away, the gray figure from before was walking towards me at a brisk pace. Whatever they were, I could see them wearing a trench coat and a fedora. Despite the fact the pursuer was essentially only walking with purpose, they were getting closer and closer way too quickly for my comfort. Turning away from the figure, I began to run away. Or rather, I tried to run away. My feet kept getting caught in the tree's roots, so I had to tug my feet free and try to step on the roots to get purchase, only for the roots to break under my weight and still hold my feet down. It felt like I barely made it a few feet deeper into the woods before I felt the figure behind me grab me and pull me around, facing me towards him. Once again, I couldn't focus clearly on what my nightmare was. I could see it was shaped like a man, and much larger than myself, wearing a gray fedora and trench coat. Lifting the camera to my face, I took its picture. As soon as I did, it flung me hard against the earth. It felt like that the figure was pressing its body weight against my chest while its elbow pressed into my throat. My camera flung away from my body while it threw me down, and I could feel it strangling me. I woke up to a start again, my blankets wrapped around my neck. I untangled it from my neck and sat up, breathing deep and holding my head in my hands. After a moment, the nightmare hidden by the veil of the waking world, I walked over to my computer. Checking my website, I could see the brand new pictures. Already the pictures of the trees, the trail, and the sky were selling like crazy. Still though, the pictures that weren't selling were there also. The picture of the nightmare showed me that the man in the trench coat and the fedora, he looked like a statue brought to life. His skin was the color and texture of granite. His frame was broader than any human physique I had seen. His eyes, mouth, and nose all looked like that they were barely carved into his face, and they didn't look deeper than the surface. The next dream photo taken was when the camera was flung away from me in the dream. The shot was taken just perfectly enough to show me that the stone man was crouching on my chest, while he pressed his elbow into my throat, trying to choke me to death. The final photo, which must have been taken after I woke up, but it was just the worst because it still was within the dream. It showed the stone man still crouching in the same position, but my body was gone from beneath him. The stone man's face was turned towards the camera. His expression was unchanged, blank, and inhuman. But the fact that this picture was taken within my dream means that the stone man is just waiting for me to fall asleep before trying to kill me again. Now terrified of this thing, I looked up all that I could about nightmares. The exoteric world didn't offer me anything useful. Just things like dealing with anxiety and understanding where a dream was coming from to make it stop. The more esoteric sources were a little more useful. Prayers to Morpheus, a sigil made out of salt, or hanging in an iron horseshoe over the bed. Sadly, even after saying the prayer, I didn't feel better. I didn't have enough salt to draw a sigil, and I already knew that Cold Creek wouldn't have any iron horseshoes to sell me. So I kept digging and digging, desperate for anything, and that's where I found your contact information. Look, I know you're far from Cold Creek, but I have a good feeling about you. I sent you 2,000 centi to help pay for the trip up here and pay for the consulting fee. I desperately need your help. I'm avoiding sleep as much as possible to avoid going back to my dreams, but even my micro naps lead to dreams, and the camera reveals something is in the room with me. Something much worse than an octopus and a lot scarier than the stone man. Please, Red Prince, help me. Carlos Gonzalez.
I received the previous stories in an email sent to me just a few nights ago. As far as I could tell, it was genuine. Despite the sudden nature of the email, I had to help Carlos. Still, though, even after taking the train all the way to Bullhead in the northern forest and then renting a car to drive to Cold Creek, it still took 3 days to reach Cold Creek. Once there, I spoke with the owner of the general store and with the rangers at the ranger station. Both haven't heard from Carlos in 3 days. When I first got the email, I managed to figure out where Carlos lived. About a 30-mile hike, and unfortunately the road was closed due to the weather. So I had to walk there. When I made it there with the ranger, we made it to the cabin to find it locked. Soon after a swift kick from the ranger, we were both in when Carlos didn't respond to our knocks. Inside the cabin, we found it in a disarray, the fridge open and the contents scattered across the floor. The windows were all locked, and no signs of forced entry. The bed was empty, with no signs of Carlos, no signs of him leaving either. The ranger had never seen anything like this before. Wild animals don't lock doors behind themselves, and they definitely didn't make people disappear. I did find Carlos' camera sitting next to his computer still on. The images transferred on, except for 4 pictures left on the camera. The first is Carlos laying on his bed, eyes open. The next was Carlos with his eyes closed and something hunched over in the corner. The next image showed Carlos laying on the bed, eyes closed, and something was sitting on his chest. And it was dark and a shadow, like looking heavy and out of focus. A night hag. They're able to cause sleep paralysis, and in rare causes, they can cause someone to die from fright. But they're normally not physical beings, unless. I got my answer on the last photo of the camera. It showed the night hag resting on the bed with Carlos gone. Hag is now facing the camera, her face still in shadow, but underneath the messy gray hair is 2 shining blue eyes and an open mouth smile. The teeth are way too white in the shadows. Carlos was now in the Sandman's realm, and it looks like the night hag took him there. Showing the images to the ranger, we took the camera with us. Both of us were not able to do anything about what happened to him. He was dead, with judgment passed over him. We made it back to Cold Creek. When we made it back to Cold Creek, I spoke with the general store owner. He said that his wife died in her sleep next to him. She was withdrawn leading up to her death, but after telling the general store owner what happened, he didn't want his camera back anymore. So now I'm back on the train leading back to River City. The camera in my bag, batteries removed. I've been careful not to use it, and I still think about what happened to Carlos. He was so obsessed with what he saw that he pursued it even when he was scared of it. Nightmares come from our own fears, but when we wake up, we forget the nightmare, let it fade, and take away its power. But when we are able to see it as clearly as a photo, it gets clearer and clearer in our dreams, unless it's as real as we are, and it can take us away. Even with his loss, I now have a dangerous weapon off the streets, and I can keep everyone safer. I share this story as a warning. Your greatest fear is fear itself.